So one thing in my family was don't get in a lot of debt, a lot of credit card debt. Well, I mean, I didn't have a lot of credit card debt, so I wasn't really thinking about credit all of that, I'm just like, well, am I going to pay it? Yeah, I'm going to pay it. Oh, I didn't pay this month. I'll just double up next month. You know what I'm saying? And I would do that from time to time. And back then, payments and stuff, they weren't automated like they are now. You wasn't paying from no cell phone. You were like mailing in a payment or calling in a payment. And it was just like, and this lender that I had was conservative. It wasn't like these COVID times where people have a little time to call in and say, hey, I got to figure out this car note or whatever. And so them jokers came on Easter.
Like the Easter bunny.
I had
Happy resurrection.
I had on my suit and everything.
What's up, everybody? It's Willie and Alex from the Black Culture Podcast. I know you're ready to get into this video, but before you do that,
make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Black Culture Podcast. I want to welcome today to the Black Culture Podcast my brother, my friend, Mr. John Parker.
Hey, I'm gonna clap it up for John.
Welcome, fellas. I feel welcome, and that was a very gracious introduction, man. I'm honored to be here.
That was beautiful. I almost cried.
He's fattening me up for the kill. That's
what you figured me out.
Yeah, right.
So I'm curious where we start with you. I think before we get started with the backstory, for people who don't know, you do a lot, and you're a very valuable person to Rhema, to family, to friends, and to Cleveland, period. But before we get started, let's make sure that we honor a tradition that Willie was hoping I forgot.
I had my checklist over here.
Right, exactly. Let's go ahead and toast it up.
All right, here we go.
All right, so let's get into John Parker. John Parker. Who is John Parker, and what does John Parker do?
Oh, snap. Okay. I don't know, man. I'm a pretty what you see is what you get, straightforward guy. I'm Levita's husband, servant of God, family man, career man. And I'm just try to be a good human. That's really it, man. I haven't put much thought into anything except for just trying to live well. That's really it.
That's great. I think that should be everybody's goal. But your work specifically is connected but diverse, because we met as musicians through Steve, but when we got to know each other better, like the work that you do, you are in a sense a civil servant, because the work that you do is service to others. And so just kind of describe that a little bit, and then we're going to jump into your backstory, because I think it's really interesting, the career path you chose.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm literally a civil servant. I've been employed with the Cuyahoga County Division of Children and Family Services for it's going on 21 years. Served many years as a child protective specialist, and now I'm in a quasi administrative position in case review. It used to be fully administrative. Now it's covered in organized a little bit differently with our agency. But in this position, I'm able to see the complete practice of our agency. I interact with child protective specialists, investigators, supervisors, and serve really as a gatekeeper for agency policy as we try to make safety decisions in a team decision making, or through the team decision making process. So I've been doing that for a while now. But yeah, I've been in public service in terms of my standard, traditional, conventional type employment for about 21 years. Yeah.
Wow. So, which is your job, your career fits you because you come from a very tight-knit family. We actually interviewed your brother, Anthony Parker. So
Mhm.
the Parker family is, if you know the Parker family, you guys are very close, very talented. So I kind of feel like it's very fitting that you went into a career path of child protective service. And I can just imagine some of the things you've seen, you've witnessed. Do you feel like it makes your job, I don't want to use the word easier, but do you feel like it kind of makes it your job more, I guess I can use the word easier, to face some of the things you've seen through the years on a day-to-day basis and give out advice because of the background you've came from?
Yeah. So, yeah, my family background, certainly my faith, all those things have really informed my own personal lens that I see the world through, and actually has formed my own personal biases that I interpret what I see um, through that lens. And so, a core set of values and morals and just a code of ethics, definitely from my family, from my faith. It's really given me longevity in the field. I didn't choose the field. It chose me. Initially, when I set out into my college education, I was actually in the business school. I was going to, my mind was really set on corporate America. That informed my choice of John Carroll, who was somewhere in the top 5 as far as business schools regionally and had a really good national standing. So that was really my ambition. A few experiences and just kind of evaluating who I was as a person kind of changed that for me midstream in college. And I started pursuing industrial organizational psychology. And so
Now, to break that down for the audience, because some people may not know what that is, and I'm one of those people.
so it's very closely, even though it's a psych major, it's very connected to the business community, HR, hiring practices, ethics, putting together performance evaluations, job descriptions, just a whole science behind hiring, test and measurements. So I think maybe I can explain it. One of my first internships or jobs was with RTA.
Hey guys, it's Willie from the Black Culture Podcast. I know you're enjoying this dope interview, but before you continue,
make sure to like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Black Culture Podcast.
And, would hire structural and civil engineers or city planners because they are quasi-government agency. And I would put together like the test, so this person with this advanced degree would have to have a test and based upon the knowledge and skills and abilities that were required for that job. And so with that test, there would be criterion, like, how are we rating the successful completion of this criterion and how do we evaluate it? And so there's it's not haphazard when it comes to those type of things. And so that's one of the things that I would do. And so there's supposed to be a flow between, the job description, what you do, how you're evaluated, and how you're compensated. And so that was really what the field that I was really interested in. And I'm still interested in that somewhat. It's just after when I was completing my education at that time, RTA had a hiring freeze. And so the job that I would have stepped in that I had been doing for like a year, that would have paid me really well, they weren't able to hire me. And that hiring freeze didn't let up for, I think, maybe a year and a half afterwards. And so I went went through and got into insurance, for a second. But then I heard that the county was doing a mass hiring. And at that time, they offered like a tuition reimbursement program after being there for so long. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to make a pit stop by the county, and I'm gonna go ahead and sign up. And so me and actually First Lady, Pastor Parker's wife, Antoinette, who happens to be my sister-in-law, we got hired on at the same time, went through training, and we're still there. And so I didn't know what a child protection specialist, I didn't know what social work was. I didn't know how, like, even 696 kids, the kids hotline, I didn't know how any of that worked. I had the same idea that we all had, especially if you grew up in Black home. 696 kids, bad. You know what I'm saying? We calling the people on you, or, oh, that's the people who come and take them babies if parents are beating on their kids, and that was my whole concept. I didn't know. But
Man, this is interesting. I never knew this story. I never
man. I
knew
just learned
you
a
were
lot,
about to.
man.
Yeah, I just learned a lot about you. So your life would have been completely different had you now. It's funny you said it. So it lasted for about a year and a half. Why didn't you circle back?
Because the contacts that I had there, they lost. One lady left, and I think she started maybe teaching or something at Kent. So all of my roots were like really gone there from RTA. So I didn't feel like I would have had an in, so that's why I didn't circle back. Yeah. So but I had, the other thing is, I got hired by the county, and suddenly, social workers don't make a ton of money, but when people say that social workers don't make money, I don't know if they're looking at county government. I think what they're saying is they don't make what they're worth. Okay. Because I'm out of college, pretty fresh out of college, and I got my first check, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then they had just revamped the compensation program, and we're getting these big jumps, these big raises. And so it was like, I joke with one of my coworkers. I'm like, if I was going to leave, I should have left within the first first 4 years, because they jump you. At that time, they were jumping you so quickly because they really wanted to retain people. And so that, and the tuition reimbursement thing, I was like, yo, I'm gonna try to take advantage of this. And it was cool. And I was single, living with my parents. And it was just like, whoa, I was cool, and I thought I was going to use it as a stepping stone. Went to grad school for a little bit. And but then I met a certain young lady, and while she was definitely for me in terms of going through and finishing, I stopped for a second to concentrate on our wedding plans. And then as I wanted to resume, they had cut out the tuition reimbursement program. And I said, I don't know if I like this or love this enough to take this money out of my, to finance it myself. And I certainly didn't want to go back into any type of loans or debts around it. And then also at that time, it was financing not just social work. What I was studying was public administration at Cleveland State. I didn't want a degree in social work. And so, I mean, that's what it was. And they didn't, actually, they never brought the program back. But there's been some other programs like Case Western Reserve offers a fellowship for social work. And it's a full situation where they pay everything, and through our agency, and that's been offered to me a couple of times. And I don't know. I mean, it really depends on what I feel my next move is going to be with the agency, and if, or outside of the agency, and if I feel like I actually could benefit. Because right now, the whole thing with education, the whole model, and I know I'm saying, I'm just talking, right? But the whole model around education has shifted. You know, I'm not out here about to get a degree just to get a degree.
Absolutely.
Hold on, yeah, because listen,
that's your thing, Willie.
Yeah,
That's your thing.
yeah. But before we go there, because we're gonna get there, we're gonna stay there for a while when we get there. But before we get there, I want to backtrack a little bit, because I want to get into you're the youngest, right?
Yes, sir.
You're the youngest out of how many?
Oh, he's the
Out of
baby.
7. And
Out of 7.
That's a position that I value and I hold. I'm a baby.
He's the spoiled one.
So
Yes,
as a pastor, as Anthony Parker said, he said everything was good until this Johnny Parker character came along. So let's jump into your backstory and your upbringing, and of how it was growing up in the Parker household. Definitely by you being the youngest. I'm sure you've learned some do's and don'ts from your siblings ahead of you.
No, for sure. Nobody was like crazy wilding out or anything. There's a few older ones who had some mouth, or who a little sassy, you know, but I learned that. But there was, you know, between me and pastor, we're the closest in age. We're just under 4 years apart, right? And so then the next is Martin. He's 8 years apart. And so then 2 years older than Martin is Myrna. And so we're kind of like that lower portion of the family, right? And then obviously when you have a family that big, you have siblings that kind of take on just naturally kind of like a parental role, right? You know, it's kind of like, hey, you know who you can go to with puppy dog eyes, and they can get you what you want, you know, who's going to take care of you. And so that was that. No, man, it was great being the youngest. I came along at an interesting time. I came when my mom was making some choices about her own education. And so when she decided to go back to school, she came, you know, she decided to go through Tri-C. I went with her. So I am an alum of Tri-C.
That's cool, man. Y'all went to school together?
I was in her daycare.
That is good, man.
No, I was in
cool.
at Tri-C. And so I would be in daycare or preschool, and she would be in her classes. And then she completed that and went through. And as she went higher in education, the model back then gave her a direct benefit financially, you know? And so she was able to climb, economically with better and better jobs and more pay, associates, bachelor's, then master's. And so I was able to see, and then my dad at that time was retired. So the income that he had was pretty much fixed, right? But I was able to see our family climb economically, you know, through through what my mom was doing. And so I probably had a few more privileges than my older siblings.
Of course.
Yeah.
To be expected. I mean, you know.
Yeah, because we were in a different financial place. And then I had older siblings who were working. So, I mean.
So you was double dipping.
Right. I had a good, but I think the formative years and understanding how huge our family was, like I was always very concerned. And Alex will let you know too. I think I probably fellowshiped with Alex a little bit more outside of church than you, Willie. But like any move that I make, I'm very conservative when it comes to money. You know, I'm generous, but I don't do stuff unless it really makes sense. And I think that was just through observing, you know, the household dynamics and kind of getting to know, you know, I'm on my mom's, you know, the hem of her skirt, you know, kind of following closely. And then you, as a child, you start knowing like, okay, money's coming in here, this shopping trip, you know, this is 2, you know, shopping carts full. The next trip is a little slimmer. And you kind of know like, okay, this is time to get clothes. This is when, and you just kind of know when to, you pay attention to those things and you know when to ask for stuff, right? And so that kind of informed, I think I was very conservative in my spoiledness.
I like that. Conservative in your spoiledness.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's funny because like a lot of people don't understand those early childhood values. We talked to
at a young age too.
Yeah, at a young age. Talking to Carlin and CJ, and they had the Jackson Academy, and they talked about how that kind of helped shape their mindset for success.
Yeah.
And what you said about learning to be conservative at home, one, which is awesome, because there's a lot of cases, and I'll just speak specifically as a Black man in a Black community, when you grow up not having, you grow up wanting so much more, and you don't actually develop discipline to be conservative. And there's this thing with driving a certain vehicle, living in a certain area.
It's like when you first get a little piece of money, you go crazy.
Exactly. And John has taught me a lot in that area. And it's really helped me to see things differently, opposed to just your typical successful family, because you do come from a successful family. I remember I texted you, I was like, man, because I think you had told me about one of your relatives who just got a new high up position, and I started thinking like, man, is your whole family success? Is like is that the Parker way is like to be successful?
Remember we talked about that standard when we was interviewing Carlin and CJ. It's like, it's literally the Parker standard. Like,
you know what?
But all very humble though, super humble.
I think that my family has put a lot of stock into living well, into having shared experiences as humans, and the money piece we're figuring out, you know. But I think that what you all see is indicative of what our family viewed as wealth. And so I think that that's the image that we project, and but none of that really has to do with money and finances. It's just, you know, maximizing everything that you have and valuing your relationships, first with God and with other people. And that has been really the formula for the success. And so, I mean, you know, there's times, I mean, I'm doing well now. I mean, there's pitfalls. There was an informal learning through observing as far as how to do money and spending habits of mom. But, you know, Pastor Dobbins, I believe, who's been on here, he talked about a more formal situation in his household when he was with his father, where his father would talk about stocks, investments, blah, blah, blah. Those discussions weren't had in my household. And so, but it was about, as far as not being wasteful and stewardship, you know what I'm saying? And so you learned it in a different way. But, you know, of course, I've had pitfalls and stuff. I was sharing with Hodge, the drummer at the church, one of the low points. I'm making like, again, hired in several years. This is before I'm married, living at home, no crazy financial responsibilities. For some reason though, I just didn't see the value of always paying my car note. It was just always like, okay, I'll get to it sometimes.
I like how you said that, man. For some reason, I didn't see the value in always paying my car note.
And let me tell you something. It was just like, because so one thing in my family was don't get in a lot of debt, a lot of credit card debt. Well, I mean, I didn't have a lot of credit card debt, so I wasn't really thinking about credit all of that. I'm just like, well, am I going to pay it? Yeah, I'm going to pay it. Oh, I didn't pay this much. I'll just double up next month. You know what I'm saying? And I would do that from time to time. And back then, payments and stuff, they weren't automated like they are now. You wasn't paying from no cell phone. You were like mailing in a payment or calling in a payment. And it was just like, and this lender that I had was conservative. It wasn't like these COVID times where people have a little time to call in and say, hey, I got to figure out this car note or whatever. And so them jokers came on Easter.
Like the Easter bunny.
I had
Happy resurrection.
I had on my suit and everything. I was ready for church and about to load up my vehicle, and a towing truck came. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, I ain't called AAA. This joker hitched up my car, and I'm like, what is going on? And I'm out here, and he's like, oh, I was sitting by, I forget who I was financed through, to come repossess your vehicle.
Oh, man.
And my mom was like, this is just the enemy. What is going on? And she's trying to pray him away, and I'm like, oh. And then I was like, well, they did call. And I'm like, dude, I'm just like a payment behind, or you know what I'm saying? I was going to call it in Monday, whatever. And he was like, and the stupidest thing is they took that joint on Sunday, and Monday, I had the money and I had to pay, and I paid everything to get it out. You know what I'm saying? Like this foolishness, and all of that. So I know that was a
Hey, quick question, man.
Yeah.
Was there Easter candy in the car?
Nah.
Oh, I'd have been extra mad if it was Easter candy in there.
My basket was on the piano because my mom always had a basket for me. And then when she, when I got married, Levita took that over, so I still get a basket. But yeah, all that. Yeah,
that's
man.
Hilarious, man. So I have a quick question, because you talked about your family. Before we dive back into your work, with all that you've learned from family and the work that you do, and I'm sure there's way more interesting stories to come outside of the car repossession. What would you say top 3 values that you live by, based upon your experiences that you apply to your life every day?
Okay. And we're drawing from family background and just present work experiences, right? Understand like who you are. So I'll say understand who you are and be true to that. Always be in a state of learning. And honor God. And if I were to put those in order, I would say honor God. And through honoring God, you discover who you are and your purpose, and that's what you are to be true with, and then that informs how you pursue knowledge, right, and all of that. Knowledge should support. You should go after things that will enhance who you are. So, I mean, I would say those are top 3. And then, you know, of course, obviously, in honoring God and all that, you're going to be treating people right. You know, all that stuff comes with that. So, yeah, I would say
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you in your 20s out here getting your car repossessed and working for the county.
Yeah.
So when you first started with the county, what was the biggest shock? Because you came from this very tight-knit family,
Yeah.
house full of love. I never got a chance to meet your dad. I've had a chance to meet your mom. But what was the biggest culture shock for you when you first started?
That people are raggedy. And I'm just talking about people. I'm not talking about poor people. I'm not talking about Black people. People. The GO that I was assigned to reached all the way from Garden Valley all the way to southwest suburbs, including Brecksville, Strongsville, North Royalton. Okay. And from top to bottom, people are raggedy.
Real quick, so for people that don't understand that, that's like all over. That's pretty much
Yeah.
what percentage of the county would you say that is?
I mean, it's a huge, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But what I would say that it covers a vast terrain of economic situations. People who are completely impoverished to people who are exorbitantly rich. And when I say people are raggedy, it's just that's the human condition. People have a level of dysfunction, and it really depends on how pervasive that dysfunction is when it looks to how your daily functioning is and the health of your family. Right? Every family has some level of dysfunction, and coming into that awareness just is like, okay, it just made me so much less judgmental. You know, it's like in trying to help people, it's like you just have to own your own stuff. You have to figure out, you have to say, man, this is the level of dysfunction that brought the county into our life. And the other thing was like, everyone is just like, if the county, you know, people have a latent distrust against the agency, right? Because of maybe even some of the practices that were employed during the day, back during the day, as far as, you know, families being separated, children being removed from families, and how disproportionate it happened in our community, right? But you know, if any agency were to look in through the windows of any household 24 hours a day, they could find some level of dysfunction. And I thought that only bad people got 696 kids called on them, the hotline calls. You know, because again, I didn't know nothing about the agency before I got hired. So that stuff was eye-opening. Eye-opening and life-changing. Anybody could get a call on them. Anybody. Yeah, go ahead.
It's funny growing up in the suburbs, originally from the inner city, but moved to the suburbs when I was in second or third grade, right? So that was pretty much my world after that. But we all know that there's another world. And for those people who have never been exposed directly, like it's one thing to just drive through, right? Mm-hmm. Or to visit relatives every once in a while. But for those people who have never been exposed, give them a snapshot of what it's like. And you work in those climates in the child protective services field. Some of the situations that you've kind of had to be the mediator within.
Oh, wow. I mean, typically, so I spend all of my time as a ongoing or extended service worker, which means that the case got past the hotline stage and it got past the initial investigation stage, so you have a hotline that screens it in, right? And depending on what the situation is, a hotline worker will go in and make a safety decision right then and there as far as what's going on, right? More times than that, they'll do their preliminary and say, hey, we need to assign this to an investigator who will look further into the situation. At that time, it would be within the space of like 30 days, right? We're looking in to family. If it's something like, the house is, figuratively on fire, like it's a crazy situation, then they would call a meeting and make a decision then. But if it was a situation where there's just some concerns going on, they try to help that family. And if that family really didn't resolve those issues within the space of that part of the investigation, or maybe they're not responsive, then they would hand that case off to an ongoing worker. And what my job was at that time was to engage those families, like, hey, after at the conclusion of this investigation, our agency felt like you have some issues. And more commonly than not, especially in the Black community and lower income community, it would be, like a weed case, marijuana, parents using marijuana, or maybe alcohol, some type of substance use. And usually with that, maybe even some type of mental health thing, where it would be concerns about the parents' parenting practices. Maybe somehow they're not supervising their kids. Maybe somehow they're at some low level of depression, or some level of depression where they're not sending the kids to school. Maybe substance use is impacting them having enough food. I've got to get my drugs, so I'm selling my food stamps, right? I'm selling my food stamps so I can get my drugs or whatever, and then I'm running out of food at the end of the month, Or sometimes there's cases where parents have used excessive discipline with their children, to the extent where they've beat them, and the children have, have sustained some, not just marks and bruises, but some serious damage where they've had to have some medical treatment, and it's caused some serious harm. And so those would be the cases that I would deal with, and I would coordinate services with service providers. So it's almost like a checklist, and it's called a case plan. Substance abuse issues. Willie, we got concerns about substance abuse with you. And then you really mad because the agency done blew down on you, right? And you mad because 696 got called on you. So by the time I get to you, I would be like, hey, Willie, man, I know, hey, yo, nobody wants to have a 696 kids at their door. Nobody wants to have a social worker. I understand that. But they're saying that there's concerns that you didn't address during this investigation stage. And you know what? If you're saying you don't really have no issue, I want you to drop urine. And, if you drop urine and we get some bad results back, then I'm going to ask you to do an assessment and we can work through this together. You don't want me as a social worker, and I don't want you on the caseload. As a matter of fact, I want to empower you to try to figure out how we can build and move beyond that. That was always my approach. And because I felt that when you had a sympathetic tone towards people and realized that nobody wants a social worker in their life, and you try to be reasonable, like, okay, Willie, you're a working man. Okay, so it's not reasonable for me to say, go drop urine at 11 o'clock a.m. Okay, let me find some hours that'll work with you. Empowering people, realizing that people are human. And then also, one of the things that our agency has gotten better at some 20 years later is, well, you have substance use. Is it in front of the children? How is it impacting your ability to care for your kids? Right? Mental health. You have a mental health diagnosis, but are you taking care of your kids? Are your kids safe? Because certain things that our through people's personal biases back in the day that would be automatic triggers for removal, we got to look at those differently, because you know what? You were encroaching upon the rights of these people, and you were getting these children adjudicated as abused and neglected in a disproportionate way in the Black community when these kids should have never been in the system. And you didn't even stop and ask, well, do you have an auntie that can maybe look after these kids while you get these things together? So maybe I just came to a dirty home. Maybe that was the issue, dirty home and not enough food. And we find out that the parent is unemployed and has some mental health, you know, and they just need to make a couple of calls to some people to get themselves right. You know what I'm saying? In terms of the basic needs, and with some empowering conversations, maybe they would have that mental health assessment and get the help that they need, whether it's counseling and or medication, right? But sometimes workers wouldn't have these real conversations with people. Sometimes the agency would be super, super restrictive and say, you've got these issues going on. You know what? Kids shouldn't be in no dirty house, and you have mental health. Oh, and there's an alcohol bottle, and we gotta put you somewhere that's better for you. Not realizing that kids rather live in dysfunction with their family, with the dysfunction that they know, than go to Pleasantville and live in substitute care with someone who they don't know.
Wow. So I have a question, but now I kind of want to split it up into two parts. I want to know, what are some of the three most common issues that you've seen inside homes or inside families? And also, I want you to break that down into what are some of the three most, because you said things have changed over the years, the way, the approach and everything. What were some of the issues that you thought, as far as the approach or the way the system or the social worker will go about? Like, what pretty much what have you seen that's improved to make, because you seem like you have a system and your system works, but everyone else may not have thought that system works? Because when you do think of social worker, a lot of people don't think of the nice settled type, let's talk, let's do this, but the strict, hey, what are you doing right here? That's not working. We coming to get your kids. We need you to do this, that, and the third.
Right. It's being sympathetic, and then some level of empathy. Because too, you know, and you know, you bring yourself with you to any job that you're working through. And while I was able to you know, to see my family rise economically, you know, I know that there were some lean times. And I know that there were some times that maybe, you know, all right, you know, this is when I was really young. I'm looking at the refrigerator and I'm like, it ain't really there. And if somebody else peeked in at that moment, they were like, they ain't got no food, but not realizing that mom or whoever, once they get off work, they about to go to the store. You know, or maybe, you know, the check that we thought was going to be in the mail, you know, it was supposed to come today, but it came tomorrow. Or maybe the money, mom, dad have the money, but they had some other obligations that they didn't get to the bank before close. So then they got to wait till tomorrow, whatever. Those are real things that when you look at people, when you start talking about basic needs, you know, or a situation where, you know, and my parents were really great about keeping utilities and stuff on or whatever, you know, all that type of stuff. But if there was a situation where it was like, okay, we got to pay, we had a financial emergency, had to fix something in the house, maybe fix the car, do something. All right, lights, you know, okay, we called, made arrangements. We're going to make sure we pay the light, you know, and matter of fact, we're going to pay it tomorrow. But for some reason, there's a glitch. Person didn't make a note on the account and they turned it off, you know. Now imagine that happening, but then you got somebody else in your family who you beefing with, who catches you in that pocket of time and then call on you and say, hey, they ain't got no utilities on and it's wintertime. I'm concerned about these babies and they ain't never got no food. And so when you go in, you get a hotline report, and you get this write-up. And as a worker, you read it and you see if there's anything else that's going on historically. And you read it. And if you just take the report at face value, the report comes from a referent that's reporting out. It is your job as an investigator to go and check it out to see if there's any validity. And then also to talk and ask, Alex, what's going on with this? What is your plan to address this? And how are your children going to be safe right now or overnight? It's winter, it's cold. What plan do you have? All right. And that is what our agency has gotten better at. Our agency over the last 10 years has gotten really better at work with families and saying, what plan do you have to keep your children safe? Because maybe you already made a call. Okay. Now, if I come blowing down and I'm just talking about all these concerns and pointing my finger in the face, first of all, you got a latent distrust of government agencies. You don't want no social worker because nobody feels like a social worker is in your house to help you. And maybe my tone has offended you, right? Maybe, and so you might be defensive and you might not be in a headspace where you can say, I got this worked out. So maybe based upon how you were brought up, your style of communication, maybe your thing is to be more combative with me.
Man, I'm so glad you said that. There's a lot to unpack there, but you said that in our communities, there is a latent distrust of white people, especially when it comes to things like this. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask, how long did it take you? I'm not sure how many cases you look at each year, but how long did it take you when you first started to start seeing through, okay, I can approach this a little bit differently opposed to following every single thing by the book?
Well, so one of the things is I tried my best to learn agency policy, and I saw that agency policy in its purest form had allowances for this, for me to do it in the style in which I started to do it. So when you say by the book is maybe how people have traditionally done it. But the spirit of the Ohio Revised Code, there's families back in the day, say 20, 30 years ago, who because their child got a real bad spanking or bad whooping, kids got removed. In the Ohio Revised Code, it does not say that you cannot whoop your kids. It don't say that. There's a whole range of factors that go in to determine whether a child is physically abused, including does that child have any legitimate fear of their parent? And I'm not just talking about fear of consequences, but I'm like fear of at any time this parent can jump on me and I am traumatized, right? And so there's a range. And so once I really started becoming really aware, I went to this one training called a CAPMIS training, which is a field guide. And we had a really great director, I believe her name was Yvonne Billingsley at the time, director of our legal department, who, and she was a woman of color. And she actually facilitated the training and said, your CAPMIS guide says this, that, and the other. And you guys have been encroaching upon the rights of families. And you've been out here like willy-nilly, just doing it the way you do it based upon your own biases. And you're hurting kids. And our agency really listened and responded. And I really believe that we've been doing a remarkable job of correcting our practice. But the thing is, we all bring ourselves with us to work. And if I have a bias, a certain bias, maybe I'm tolerant of people who maybe do drugs. I'm tolerant of people who may have, some other level of dysfunction, but maybe there's domestic violence. That's a trigger for me. And that is my bias. And so if I even read that in the report, I'm coming in blazing You know, I'm a man of some size. So if it's a dude that's in the house, I'm going to come and I'm going to punk him out. You know what I'm saying? Like, people bring biases like that, which is really dangerous when you look at trying to really fulfill your role in protecting, because contrary to popular belief, the agency don't want to take kids. The paperwork that is involved with taking kids and the level of scrutiny and that decision or whatever, that's really the last thing that we really want to do.
That's actually something I wanted to get into, because once a child is taken from the home, and based upon your work, regardless of why, it could have been something as simple as the lights were off, or they didn't have food in the home today, or the car got repossessed. I know you know a little something about that, but what is the process now of trying to get my kid back?
Okay, so all right, and let's get a little bit into my current role, because I spent a lot of time talking about what it was when I was doing field work. Okay, I'm in the office now, and those decisions come by my desk, and I'm part of a unit of when we're fully staffed, I believe 14 facilitators. I'm a case review facilitator, and there's an investigation, and the investigative worker, if those concerns, and they have a whole set of guidelines before they pull a meeting with me, but if those concerns have rose to the extent where we feel like removal of a child might be the safety intervention that is needed, then they schedule a staffing. And what a staffing is a team decision-making meeting, right? And it's comprised of the investigative worker and their supervisor, and the family supports, and if there's any service providers that can be brought in, and then also myself, and I guide everyone through those meetings. And I have to know agency policy, and I have to know the law, and where those things mix, and inform our decision making when we try to figure out the best safety intervention. The first thing that we're supposed to do is we're supposed to consider the least restrictive option. That means these concerns, no food, lights out. Okay. Can mom, dad verify that they paid the light bill, or they send in a payment and it's just a matter of them, undoing it and turning it back on tomorrow? Okay. Or did mom and dad say, yeah, this is messed up, so, I'm Alex. Hey, I'm calling Willie. Can my kids crash with you until I get this straightened out? It's going to take me about a week or so. And then in that call to Willie, then, the worker would need to say, okay, well, is that a safe plan? Is Willie's home safe and stable? No drama, no risk of the children, as far as we know it, being abused and neglected. And so the first thing it is try to do is try to figure out not just the concerns, but the strengths of the family. Do they have a network of support? Do they have an action plan that they can employ to try to figure out what they can do before our agency is saying that we need to take some type of action that might be more restrictive? And so the investigator has a very small window to try to engage them in that conversation. And if it feels like those things won't tie together neatly, then we need to have a meeting with someone like myself. And then we'll go through and we'll discuss all the risk factors, all the safety factors, and the family strengths. And when I say a team, it's really supposed to be the team, because the meeting is the family. The meeting, the experts, the family knows. And I try to watch my tone. My coworkers say that I soft talk people. Hey, Mr. Ashford, I understand. I mean, we got this call, and this is just what's on the paper. The paper says X, Y, Z. ABC. We need to know what your response is to it. We need to work together. You're the expert. You know what's going on in your household. And I want to create an environment where you feel empowered to speak your truth. I know you just met me. I know that we don't have rapport, but we're here. This meeting is for you, and we need to hear from you. In your own words, tell me, why are we here today? And when you start a meeting off like that, instead of saying, hey, well, we got a hotline report and these are concerns, your house is messed up, your lights are off, and blah, 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 and we need to know whether we need to take your kids or not. Whoa, that's so heavy-handed.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So you have to start off by empowering families. And I've had great outcomes like that. And when you do that, sometimes, like I said, families are too nervous when they get that first knock on the door to try to even think through other solutions. But at the table, when we're having our staffing, sometimes they can think, well, I do have this one auntie. We don't really talk. She don't really mess with me or like that. But I know she has love for my kids. Maybe I can call her and get her on the line. And then we find out that this auntie, in many cases, there's been times where we find out that the auntie is a certified, licensed foster parent. I've had a case like that within the last 3 months. And we call that auntie and they say, hey, I had no idea that that my part of my family was going through this, but by all means, I can keep these kids. And so either they can enter into care, through by way of custody, or sometimes it's just an informal family arrangement, where people can keep kids. And so the whole idea now, the whole approach now in our team decision-making process is not just to talk about the concerns, but to talk about the strengths and to try to flush out the parent by having an empowering tone and empowering content in the discussion, and try to figure out, can you help us? Can you make a plan? And the plan that you have, is it viable? Is it something that we can support? And when we do
this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Has it ever been anybody that you knew personally?
A few times, and I've recused myself. Hey, I know this person. Yep, this is mother so and so. Yeah, no, can't do this meeting. So
bias. Yeah, I get it.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting. You're in a position to determine outcomes. Your brother's in a position to determine outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of these cases ever go to court? And if so, have they ever been in front of your brother?
Right. So
that's a good one, man.
Well, he does a different type of law. He doesn't do family law. Yeah, he does a different type of law. There's been some intersections, not with anything, a case that I've dealt with, but he'll call and maybe get a private client that who's on a private case who says they want an attorney to deal with this, that, and the third. So, and his legal group will handle that. And so we'll discuss some basic policy type stuff, just so that they're good, but no direct contact with anything like that. No. But yeah, the cases go to court. If removal, if for some reason we can't come up with a family plan, that doesn't involve court, right? If it's a situation where, maybe it's a 3 to 4 week fix where I just got to get my stuff together, get engaged in services. Can you watch my kids? And then the county feels like, okay, at the end of that time, if they're complying with us, then maybe we can have the children go back home, continue to work services. That's the kind of stuff that we could, that we are able to avoid court involvement. But if it becomes a situation where we need something more restrictive and it can't be resolved like that, then our agency will make a recommendation at the conclusion of one of my meetings, one of my staffings, and the agency will go to our legal department. And if the legal department feels that we have grounds, then they will submit that recommendation to the court. Sometimes it's emergency custody. Sometimes it's a different form of custody. And so they do become court involved. And I will say that, say, Alex or Willie's the social worker, you don't have a meeting with me and the family basically to say, hey, man, I want to talk to you about just some concerns. You need to get yourself together. That's a whole different process. That's a family team meeting. You only pull the trigger with me after you've really had some time to kind of, you're looking at the case and you're like, there's some serious issues where these children might have to come out of the home. Like, that's legit a possibility. That's when you schedule a meeting with me. And of course, I do some other types of meetings, but when we're talking about child removal, though, that's really the initial step towards that.
That's a perfect way for me to jump in, because I have another question. So it seems like the job requires a lot of home visits, and it seems like the in-person visits at the office may be more productive. But over the year of the pandemic, how has that affected the job? How has it changed? Because, you can make a call and a voice, you may sound like you may coming off strong, but in person, that just may be your personality. So how has that affected the pandemic, working from home and having meetings? Like, how has that affected your work?
Right. So for me, fortunately, I did on my time, hard time, when I would go into houses and everything, and that's not within the scope of my job, but certainly workers were impacted. In some cases, they were still going to homes. And then for some cases, they were doing virtual visits and all that type of stuff. But if there's an emergency, they had to still suck it up and go and assess safety by being in a home. You can't assess safety over the phone, For my job has been on a platform similar to Zoom. It's been Microsoft Teams. And what I have seen through my facilitation of these meetings is that I've been better to engage fathers and service providers. So say if an emergency meeting gets called and it's kind of in the middle of the day when we're having meetings in person, you would have to make that choice like, yo, I'm gonna have to take an hour off work. Not just an hour. I mean, if the meeting is scheduled to be an hour, it can go for an hour and a half. You got to think about your commute to the meeting and your commute back to work. And so for many people, that would be a half day. And most employers are just like, if you're going to take a half day, you might as well take the whole day off. And then there's a lot of people who just don't have it like that, because not only are you talking about going to these meetings, you're talking about, potentially going to court. And so I think that having the flexibility of this platform has been easier to engage working parents. Okay. And then also service providers, if you're a therapist, counselor, chemical addiction counselor, whatever, or community support. And if part of your job scope is to participate in these meetings, what if you've got 3 meetings in one day, and you've got paperwork to do. And you have to write, you have to draw individual service plans for maybe a kid that you're servicing. The convenience of being able just to call in and to participate in those meetings has been great. I feel that workers have been more prepared, whereas in person, if I'm a worker, if I'm a little mousy, if I intimidate easily, or if I'm just kind of shy about stating legit concerns to a parent that might have maybe a brooding personality or a more intimidating look, or maybe the parent is a little confrontational, loose cannon type person, workers have been a little bit more direct, but also have been more free to help parents brainstorm for some reason. And I've seen a lot of out of the box solutions coming out of these meetings where people have been a lot more flexible in their thought. And so overall, I believe that my job has been executed very effectively and on this platform. Of course, in principle, there are certain things in terms of engagement that probably should be done face to face. If we call in an emergency and we're legit getting ready to remove your children for the first time based upon an emergency, just the human element that might be a little bit better to do face to face. So if you were to ask me if our administration was listening or would pay attention to me or my input, I would say that maybe some meetings should stay on this platform. So say if, whenever a child is removed, automatically there is a family case plan developed, which provides that roadmap of how to get your child back home. It's always with the purpose of trying to get your child back home. And then after the initial removal, within 6 months, there's an automatic state mandated review of the case. And so if we're reviewing cases, maybe that's something that can just be done over the phone, but maybe those initial custody meetings, maybe that's something that needs to be happening face to face. So we don't know how we're going to do that, but I know that was a long answer, but I think that my particular job has actually benefited through the pandemic.
No, that actually was a great answer. And you said something in there. It kind of brought up another one I wanted to ask you. You grew up in a household with the father. Alex grew up in a household with his father. I did not grow up with my father, but I've always had a father figure in my life. And in our community, definitely the Black community, there's this thing that there is not enough Black fathers or a father figure in the household. So you're in a line of work to where I feel like it's perfect to ask you that question. I want to know, just give me your take on that about the lack of fathers or even a father figure. And do you see that a lot when you go into these homes?
Unfortunately, yeah, it has a huge it has a huge impact on youth too. So much so that when I say first 5-7 years of my practice in social work, it'd be like, hey, you go to a house, the father's not there. Sometimes wouldn't even ask about the father. Or maybe would ask, hey, who's the father? I don't talk to him and blah, 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 blah. No more questions asked. All right. One thing that clicked for me was I had this one case and mom said, I don't know who the daddy is. I don't know. But the kid was like 12, 13. And it just dawned on me to ask, like, okay, do you know who your father is? My dad is Leroy Jenkins, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, he bought me some tennis shoes last week and blah, 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 blah. My mom be tripping because they don't get along, but he sees me and does this, that, and the third. And then digging in other cases, like mom saying she don't know who the daddy is. She mad at him. She don't want to say who he is, but this man is on papers paying child support and visiting his child. And so we've gone through meetings, we've gone through court hearings and meetings because you will not give, you're not communicating, you're telling the worker that there's no father. And because of the bias against fathers, the workers, and myself included early on, I wasn't digging.
I want to just real quick. I'm sorry, because I even know people that they've said, yo, the mother of my child is denying me to see my kid. And a lot of mothers will manipulate the system that way. So to hear that coming from you on this topic kind of validates what I hear a lot of people say. Like it's a lot of good fathers out there that want to be there for their child, but because of maybe the benefits of a mother may get of a father not being there, they kind of deny that.
It can happen, and they'll sell it as if, as if they don't get along with the father, just to throw everybody off their scent. And they be cool when they kicking it, or they really don't get along and they don't want the fathers to be involved in the decision making. And workers, again, because of biases of thinking that fathers are absent, sometimes wouldn't ask the extra questions. And I'm like, man, so then we started getting better at that, and well, let's look at the Child Support Enforcement Agency. Is there any type of order for this father to pay child support? If he's paying child support, then there's an address. Let me get it. Let's make sure that we get him at the table. And so now, as a facilitator and as a Black man, one of the things is I'm asking when the second questions after I verify the family number and the kids is, who's the father? And so you got to ask that question. You have to ask that. I can, and Alex and Willie probably knows just from rehearsal. I can say the same thing 5 times, 5 different ways. You have to be very flexible in your communication. Hey, mom, who's the father? Okay, all right. And so, is it that the father's known, but maybe he's not really stepping up to responsibility the way you think he should, and or do you have any type of fear of what? And usually by the time you're like, he ain't doing this, that, and the other. Well, mom, just so that we can have for our record, do you mind disclosing the name of the father? And to be honest, we should, if he's not pitching in like he should be held accountable too, for what's going on with his child. And if you have a name, I'll call him right now. Let's get him on the phone. That's much different from who's the father. Ain't no father. Okay. Mother says that father's unknown. Next question. Try to get those fathers to the table, or the worker coming in, because sometimes parents, even in person or on the phone, sometimes the mom might not respond to the worker because maybe they're upset and they don't want to be in the meeting. And I asked the worker, well, who's the father? I ain't gave me no name. Or I look in the system. Here's John Doe. Is this good enough? Did you call it? Yeah, I called the number. It's disconnected. Okay, you mind if I call it? I'll call it. John Doe. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I mean, I was just, well, maybe, okay, maybe whatever. I get it. But I take it seriously, my job as far as having a voice of advocacy for fathers.
That is an episode that we're going to have to do specifically for fathers. And I'm going to just go ahead and say Black fathers, because I've seen that situation. I'm related to people where I've seen that. And it's very saddening where we're already demonized by society. But when you have a father that wants to be there for their kids, and because of the system and because the woman said XYZ, he's not allowed to. But that brings me to this point. Family therapy, which I think there is a significant role for that in our community. Based on your work and what you've seen, how big of a role do you think therapy should play when it comes to families and when it comes to specifically children?
Huge role. And I'm a pivot back, and then I'm gonna come to it. The reason why I'm gonna tell you something. There's a lot of fathers that want to be involved, but the reason why they can be overlooked is because there's a huge numbers of fathers who don't, and it perpetuates the bias. So because I've talked about some success stories, but there's fathers who will hang up and they just don't want to be involved for real. And that's another thing that within our community we gotta fix, because yeah, there's a lot of good Black men, but there's a lot of them out there that do not. But family therapy, I've really always been a proponent of that, because a successful therapeutic process does this. It identifies what's going on with the family, but it also empowers families to figure out how to fix that dysfunction of themselves. A therapist doesn't come with a cure-all. A therapist is a great coach, and a provocateur, a digger. Once they help you dig and identify stuff, they can coach you through, the stuff, but you got to do the work. Like, right? Stefanski, he was a great coach for us, man, but he didn't make one play. And so family therapy, and I can tell you this, like, even though it wasn't within my scope to be a therapist, or provide counseling in any type of, documented way, and engaging with families, sometimes you kind of fulfill that role unofficially if you take your time. And I've had the most success when I would allow people to talk it out. And I do that even now that I'm not in direct services in my function now. Like, sometimes when families are just, the meeting might not, sometimes I'll say, you know what, Mr. Johnson, I just want to give you uninterrupted time to speak. I'm not going to make any remark. And I'm going to ask everybody else on the line just to respect your space. And just let them talk and talk and talk and talk. And then sometimes when they've been able to air out, you hear a lot of fears, you hear dysfunction, but then sometimes there's a brainstorming process that kicks in. And I'm talking about within the space of an hour-and-a-half meeting that I have. And then sometimes they can say something that can point to a solution that is immediate, a solution that will have an immediate impact on the decision that we go through. So imagine having an opportunity to engage with a family week in and week out and leading them through those type of processes. And if you can get a family to talk in an environment that is emotionally supported and to do it consistently, a lot of times they can find out what's wrong, identify it, and figure out where the solution is within themselves. A lot of times, substance use, goes hand in hand with counseling, and there, there's plenty of people who use it recreationally, depending on what their drug of choice is, because they just like the high. But a lot of it is self-medication. And what are you trying to what pain are you trying to dull? What pain are you trying to deal with? And so if you can get people in an environment, again, where they're emotionally supported while they talk through some stuff, and then kind of coach them so that they can try to correct behaviors that lead to outcomes, destructive outcomes, that's how the work gets done, So,
Man,
yeah.
so growing up in a household in the way you grew up, to where how you've had your mom, your father, your brothers and sister, you guys were all close. When you jumped, or when you got into this career, was it kind of like eye-opening? Because I think a lot of times some of us, by the way we're raised, we may just expect that, hey, this is how it's supposed to go. Whether if you're raised in a negative, like in a bad environment, you may grow up thinking, hey, oh wow, this is, when you get around a good environment, it may shock you, like, wow, it gets better than what I had. So
Yeah.
was that like a shocker? Did it shake you up or anything? Or like, how was your mindset when you jumped into these cases? Like, wow, everyone didn't have it. And I'm sure you already knew everyone didn't have it the way you did, but how much more eye-opening was it when you got into these cases?
Well, it was super eye-opening. First of all, it exposed some of the junk that I had been dealing with, and I think Pastor shared, and it's public knowledge that my dad had some struggles with mental illness. My dad, when he passed, was well into his 80s, and so the field of mental health field and the science behind it was still very young, and especially treating medications or whatever. And so years of being misdiagnosed and all of that type of stuff, and the fact that he was able to accomplish what he accomplished, and that my family was able to stay together, and my mom showed so much strength of character, and so supportive, and realizing and seeing how mental health in other families is treated, and how it's treated and stigmatized by systems. The practice, again, has improved, where if someone carried a certain diagnosis when I first was, got into casework, you could pretty much say, oh yeah, well, this person is diagnosed with this, that, and the other, and their child was removed. Yeah, that diagnosis, that's going to stick with them. They're probably never going to get their kids back. That would be said at transfer at the time that I first got the case. And I've always had a level of empathy for, my supervisor, one of my favorite supervisors, said, John, you do amazing with people, mental health cases. And I keep on giving you these cases because you have these good success and these good outcomes. And it's because I'm like, well, I see the person.
I think you have grace in that area. And that's something that I've always noticed about you. And not to, I'm only going to say this because I know you have the perfect personality for this type of work. Mental health, mental illness. A lot of people, we go about our lives just living and never really think about your type of day-to-day work, which is so necessary in our society, not just in the Black community either. I mean, it's in every community. I want to know what type of mental toll it takes on you. And also with that, how rewarding your career has been, because it has to be a level of good that keeps you fueled to continue to do the work that you do, to watch a situation change. That has to be a great feeling for you.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I didn't realize, because I think I have a high threshold for stress, and I didn't realize how stressed out I was when I was in direct services, going and meeting with families and dealing. Because when you are an empathetic person, especially when it comes to mental health stuff, you internalize a lot. I look at, I would look at Mr. Johnson or Miss Johnson and look at their diagnosis. And then I would look at my dad's, what he was diagnosed with historically, and say, man, if my dad didn't have proper family supports around him, or my mom, or if my mom just chose to say, you know what, I don't have to be ride or die with him. I can take my kids and we can do something else. Like, my dad literally could be this person. with zero supports. And internalizing those things, it wears on you in a way that when you have a high tolerance for those stressors that you're just not aware of. And I wasn't aware of it too much until I changed roles. And my wife would actually, she's like, I could tell when something was affecting when you would work, because you would be a certain kind of way, you know, and I wasn't aware. So I mean, you have to figure out balance, fortunately, I've always had a great balance in my marriage, and then, with family, and then church, right? That's a great, besides spiritually, the spiritual aspects of being involved with the church community, is a great emotional release too, right? And so, I mean, after great worship services, your endorphin, I mean, that stuff is just like popping in a different way, So now I hear all the stuff, If there's parents that killed a kid or killed somebody, and if it's folks that killed somebody and they got kids, and that's going to be safety concerns, it's coming across my desk or at one of my coworkers' desks. Media involved cases, all that type of stuff. How that affects me now is I'm super specific about what I say. I'm very intentional about what I say and how I recall certain events. And if I speak on something and I say this went this, that, and the third, it's like I feel this pressure to be very precise, because like the documents that I write, they go to the court. And my role, which I love it and I'm very fulfilled in it, it has a high degree of scrutiny through administration. And so I have to be. And one of the things now, I feel myself triggered, even sometimes in normal conversation where, and my wife, she's tough. Hey, da 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 da, and I'm like, no, it's that. She's like, well, no, I was like, well, no, you're not remembering, because it was this, that, and the other, blah 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 blah, and I'm giving time, dates, and receipts, and da 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 da, and it's over like literally a chicken wing. You know what I'm saying? Like, she was like, yo. I'm like, man, okay. So while I don't have the stress of going and knocking on people's houses, on their doors, and meeting with people and going to court and everything, I have a different level of stress that is coming out in a different way. Because if I'm in a mode where I know I'm right, and that my recall of an event is like so dead on, if I'm challenged, like it chafes me, like, because my job is to be specific and to be right all day. Because if Alex said ABC and then Willie said XYZ in a meeting, I have to faithfully deliver that. And I'm not just a scribe. I don't just write reports based upon what is said, but also I have to put in information about policy. And I mean, everything that I write, if I say that it's a safety concern, it has to line up to what I understand about agency policy and the law. So I have to be dead on, And so it's kind of I'm built for that, but I just have to figure out, I had to realize that I internalize that stress, and sometimes it becomes a little bit pervasive in my day-to-day, activity. So just something to watch out for,
So you mentioned the word stress. Definitely, like coming home after your line of work. Obviously, Alex and I know your wife, but explain to the audience how important it is to have a supportive wife at home. Definitely coming from the cases that you've seen across your desk. How important is that to have that support at home?
Paramount, because I would say 90% of the time, I'm able to go through a wash and rinse type thing with work where, you know, I might have met with you, Alex, and we might have talked about like the heaviest things in a meeting, right? But I get those details up off of me. I'm usually able to do that. And so if you come to me like 3 days later, like, hey, John, remember when we met? Like, dude, I just had 10 other meetings between now. I didn't hold on to that, right? And so I'm able to kind of get that stuff out. But my wife understands that I still can carry that stress, right? And so, I mean, she's super supportive. We try to make sure that we make the best of our downtime. You know, we try to make sure that we eat together. We have our meals together. Now we're exercising together. We just try to have a healthy relationship. We try not to fight over petty stuff. You know, we don't pick on each other.
Would the last wing be petty, or is that like paramount? I'm just curious.
Do you realize that there is a wing?
I'm asking for a friend.
There's a wing shortage in America, so a wing situation.
I just heard about that. I just heard about that. There's a wing shortage in America. Whoever would have thunk it?
The price of wings have like gone up, like. Yeah, crazy.
Dude, it's crazy. So I bought some wings yesterday, by the way, and I was like, man, these wings are a little more expensive than I remember, because you know how you go to the store and you got one price already in your head.
Yeah.
Like, it's about $5-6 more than what I paid last time. Like, I don't know how that happened.
It's crazy. A half a case of wings, okay, from the store, even the hot, you know, even Dave's used to be like $39-40. It's $69 now for a half a case of wings, bro. And that's at the store. Ain't nobody cooked them or nothing. And so when you see your favorite wingery going up, even if you're going and dining somewhere, and
wingery,
and they're
well, John and I are wingologists. Just FYI, just want to let you know that
he actually got me hip to this Facebook group called Wing Addicts. Like, so
he's told me about that.
Wings
I
up.
feel like you guys should go on Hot Ones. I'm gonna try to get you guys on that one.
Ooh,
on what?
I don't know about that, man.
This show called Hot Ones.
Yeah, so hot ones. They've had everyone from Shaq to Idris Elba to, you know, basically stars. And there's 10 wings, and the hot meter goes up per wing. By the time you get to that 6th or 7th wing, dude, I'd never forget they had Gordon Ramsay on there. And, you know, he's like, this ain't nothing. This is this blah, 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 blah. By the time he got to that 6th or 7th wing, and he brought this bag with him. He had milk, he had lime juice, he had donuts, right? He's literally sitting here taking his lime juice, throwing it down his throat, spraying it on his butt. I mean, he's doing all kind of weird stuff. The wings just get hotter and hotter. Funniest one, and you've probably seen the clip, Idris Elba. So he's like, mate, I'm from West Africa. I've been eating this type of food all my life, hot food, spicy food. By the time he got to that 6th wing, that's where you saw that clip of him online. He was like, and he was coughing real hard. It was over for him. But the thing is, the whole time you're eating these wings, it's an interview. So there's a host, and he's eating the wings with you. He don't care if you about to die. He's gonna keep asking you questions, right? Wow. So you sit up there eating this wing, you sweating, your eyes watering. He's like, yeah, man. So that one time when you were at this award show and you ran into so much, and you sitting on the floor about to die. He don't care.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Hilarious show, man. Hilarious.
That would not entertain me as the interviewee, because I like to taste my food. I love wings, and I don't want it so hot that I can't taste it. You know.
And the thing is, the wings are like this big. They're not very big.
Small wings. Ah, gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love a good wing, man. A good honest wing. Guys, question: are you guys BW3 or Wingstop guys?
BW3 when I did eat wings.
When I did eat those types of wings, B-dubs every Tuesday.
Oh wow! You know what? I'm a Wingstop guy.
So here's
it's definitely an unpopular opinion, man. It's definitely like there's not a whole bunch of people who are team Wingstop. Most people are like BW3s. So I don't know.
I'm a garlic parm guy, so I think Wingstop has the dry.
I sense that about you.
Wingstop has the dried garlic parm. I don't like that. I like B-dubs. To me, has the best garlic parm wings.
Gotcha.
See, my thing is the past 4 years or so, I've been on smoked wings, grilled wings, baked wings. Fried wings, for some reason, aren't the same to me. I don't know what it is. Yeah. But I was the kid at Cleveland Heights. I leave school. I'm going down to Coventry when they had to beat up down there. That was when it was 20 cents a wing on Tuesday. Wow. Okay. And so I got $5 in my pocket. I'm grabbing 25 wings, and I'm eating every single last one of them. Right? Wow. That's the dude that I was. But no, I mean, wings for life. But now I really don't do the fried chicken the way I used to anymore.
Yeah, I've cut that down too, man. I'm more of a smoked wing person. Yeah, good stuff, man.
John, you just made history. We've never had someone we interview actually ask us a question. So congratulations on all your success, man.
That was my bailout, because I was like, dude, if we're at a loss within the first 12, 15 minutes, I'm gonna turn the gun on you guys. Like, I'm really curious, what made you guys start becoming podcastians? Like, what's the deal?
Hey, you see how he just switched everything around? Hold on. We're gonna get to that.
No,
but I'm
super curious. Like, I'm not doing it to be petty. Like, I'm really curious. Like, what?
All right, so I'll go ahead and tell the story and make it as quick as possible so we can get back to John Parker. Willie called me. I think it was he saw the series on Men's Monday where I was talking about sports and social justice. And Willie called me. He said, man, I feel like I'm being led to start a podcast. What's ironic about that was I had talked about doing that a couple months earlier, but I didn't want to do it by myself. When he called me, little did I know he was already ready to go. And so, I'm thinking, it'll be a year or two before we start. I've got my own things going on. He called me, he said, man, just let me know when you're ready, because I'm ready to go. And I think the rest is history. I think we started this podcast, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I was actually going to say this. We started it to have those difficult but very necessary conversations that we need to have in the Black culture, in the Black community. But also, and I think Willie will attest to this too, this is education for me and for him. I learned so much today, and these are the things that we don't really think about, right? We go on, we live our lives, we hear about this, we hear about that, but for the most part, as long as we're far away enough from it where it's not affecting us like in our homes, we don't really put much energy into the things that we don't really know about. So, we all know that there's dysfunction in our community, and all of it wasn't self-engineered. A lot of it has been the product of exterior engineering by society, by white America, and those that trauma has passed down, that pain has passed down from generation to generation. And a lot of it hasn't been dealt with, unfortunately, which guys like you sort of become, in a sense, and I'm very careful with my words, healer, to help sort of bring back the normalcy of, like you say, how to live well. But I think for me, that's why I jumped into this. It wasn't to be famous, wasn't to, be known, or even really to make money, which I think all of those things might come as a byproduct. But for me, it was to have these types of difficult but necessary conversations, but also to get educated about fields and things that I know very little about.
I second that. Mine's was anybody knows me knows I love sports, but I was like, I want to start a podcast, but I don't want to do a sports podcast. Everyone has a sports podcast. I wanted to do something to where I can make a difference, to where I can help people. So it kind of, we got on the phone. So I knew I wanted to do that, but I really didn't have quite of a blueprint laid out. So once God led me to reach out to Alex, it kind of went from there, and we figured out our platform, what we wanted to talk about. And one of the first things Alex and I agreed to was we wanted to have experts on. We didn't want to just be on here with topics talking outside of our neck. We wanted to have people that actually was educated in the topic we were discussing. So that's why we've had the Ryan Johnson, Anthony Parker's, did a money management show with Kenneth Dobbins and Knox. So to me, and it's something I love to do. I love to talk, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just talking just for the heck of it, but does people want to hear what I got to say? Does my information help people? And I feel like all of our episodes, you can watch our episodes and you learn. I feel like you can learn a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And speaking of, you're a gentleman who's no stranger to the mic. You also have the gift of gab, as Steve used to say, which is kind of how I want to go in this direction. We got into your career, but you're also a man of the cloth, also a musician, and who knows all the other things that you do. But those two things being very prominent and direct, kind of want to delve into that. So wearing multiple hats, having multiple responsibilities, how do you think that your work also affects your ministry as a pastor and your ministry as a musician when you get up to, because it seems like you're always giving. How does that help feed the people in that way, but also how does it help to feed you?
Well, you never can, if you're truly in service to God, you reap rewards, both spiritual and natural rewards, through me, by me executing my gift as a minister and a musician. It causes my life to be under a certain level of discipline. And I believe that when you are under a level of discipline, it impacts other areas of your life, And so that discipline has taught me stewardship. And then from stewardship, I've reaped the benefits of that. My faith walk, and really saying yes to God, really led me to my wife, and who has been like my hugest supporter and accountability partner when it comes to my faith. And as a result of that, I've been able to stay disciplined, and I've I've experienced the benefits of being disciplined in areas of my life. My ministry, I think, really goes lockstep with what I do in my vocation at the county, as far as dealing with people and trying to provide some type of leadership, whether formally or informally, but to try to lead them to some source of empowerment, right? And so at church, while I am an ordained minister, and through my church, my role isn't to preach every Sunday. My leadership capacity in the music department, but in other areas as one of the directors of the church, and it's to help pastor to lead people towards a source of empowerment, and what that is God, right? But even in informal relationships with different parishioners, kind of getting to know them, and then what I do in the church is probably one of the most visible things, because I'm responsible for really who ends up taking the stage at church, or and who to incorporate in a lot of programming that puts people kind of out front. And so, looking at Willie and like, okay, man, he's got a decent voice, but how can I connect with him in a meaningful way for him to use that gift so that it's that it edifies the church, right? And the same thing, it's the same skill set, that I employ in my job. I have the responsibility of being a flexible communicator with investigators and their supervisors, and looking at their strengths and assessing their strengths and trying to bring out the best in them so that they're able to articulate the needs and concerns of families, but then also trying to pull out in a very short amount of time, looking at families and trying to figure out, okay, this person seems to respond to this. So maybe if I talk to them this way, maybe I can empower them in the communication in the team decision-making process. For the years that I spent before being in case review as a case review facilitator, it was really definitely kind of a hands-on thing of having conversations, empowering conversations, right? Real straight talk, being very honest with people, helping them to identify. It doesn't really work well when you tell somebody just without relationship, just tell them what's wrong with them. But if you can build rapport with them, to promote conversation where they start to self-diagnose and say, yo, I kind of feel like this is what's going on. And then when you're able to empower them with that, like, yeah, you got that wrong. That's that level of dysfunction, but this is what I see. This is a strength. One of the strengths, maybe the strength is just as simple as like you had the courage to actually self-disclose. And so I think all of those skills are really in lockstep, and they're definitely not at odds with each other when it comes down to my role in ministry and my role in administratively or quasi administratively at work. Now, how does music come into it? I'm a musician. Over the last several years, I've kind of taken a non-traditional approach to music by just trying to be a bridge. And I've done a lot of, as far as talent procurement, through my own private venture, Shock LLC, where, I've served as a music consultant, and I've had an opportunity to identify talent and try to empower musicians and to place them on platforms that maybe they coveted but didn't know how to get to, and really that's how I met Alex, a band who just, I'll shout them out, Funkyard X. They just finally released an original song after many years, and they were reorganized under Steve Johnson, under a movement that my buddy Nate Johnson and I did called The Basement, which was a platform for uninhibited, clean air exploration of your arts and your skills. And it was a Christian-based kind of club alternative programming, and where musicians who didn't want to just play shouting bumps and singers who didn't want to just sing How Great Is Our God, who were people of faith, would have a stage in a clean and spiritually nourishing environment to explore the full expanse of their gifts, right? And so that's what we did for several years. But I always thought about the responsibility to take a platform in terms of the performance space and to elevate it with the artistry, right? And to present people in a way that they had not been presented. And so when we approached Steve Johnson to be the music director, I said, hey, man, I'm not bringing you in to play smooth jazz. I'm not bringing you in to play what would be considered the club anthems that you would hear at that time back in the day at the different venues, like, whatever, even if it was open mic. I said, I want you to explore your artistry, and we will do what we can, whatever price that we agree on. And he showed us love. We will make sure your band is paid every single time, and you can play whatever you want, just long as it's something that does not interfere or violate the laws of God. But you have a supportive, nurturing Christian environment to do it in. And he felt such a level of freedom in doing that. And so there's the rebirth of Funkyard through that, and so it's all about,
that's a story I actually did not know.
And it's really about finding something within people and to try to figure out, what is that hook? Like, what is it? Like, if y'all would have gave me probably 2 years of relationship with y'all, I probably would have identified and put y'all together for a podcast, because that's something that God has really given me. I really believe, without being boastful, God has given me insight into people's gifts, their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and to be able to identify and connect with them, and to try to provide platforms for them to explore those things.
That's a fact. That's a fact, because you are probably one of the best relationship builders and gift identifiers that I've ever met. Like, that's a gift that God gave you. You have the grace to do it. It just comes very naturally to you, right? And you're also one of the most sneakiest, and to get people to do things in a really nice way, but you're like, yeah, this is actually my evil plan, right? But you have so much rapport built with them that it's very hard to say no to you, man. I want you to know that it's very hard to say no to John.
True story.
But it's always based not, and I think God has given me a grace to do it, because it's literally not, have I benefited from it? Yeah. But it's levered to my benefit. It's just like, literally like, Willie, I know you want to do this. I know you want to sing this song. So how do we get this to happen without me necessarily? Maybe it would chafe you if I just directly say, yo, but if we could get you to the point where you volunteer to do it, then we all win, and I mean, that's really been the approach. And literally all of the stuff connects from the pulpit to my meetings at work. Like, at work, it's literally like, how can I identify something within you, and I only have about an hour or so to do it? How can I identify through discussion? How can I lead the social workers and the supervisors towards asking the right questions to bring out something? Because most parents don't want to lose their kids. So how do I work with that self-interest and to provoke you to come up with a plan that's viable, if at all possible? And if the end result is that we have to take your kids, how do I leave you with hope? Because after this meeting, I'm not going to be calling you. It's a one and done until we review the case, but I'm not responsible for case management like I was back in the day. So how do I impress them? How do I leave some words with you and say, yes, you know what? The worst of your fears has been realized today. We're going to file for emergency custody, but you know what? We never do that without a plan of reunification. And I hear you crying over the phone or if we're face to face. I see those tears. And it takes a lot of courage for you to even be in a meeting with people who you don't want to be in. But I believe in your heart of hearts that you first love yourself. And then secondly, you love your children and you are willing to do right by yourself and do whatever it takes to get your children back. You just have to confront those fears. You have to figure out now you're on the hook for this plan. And just, you know what? Even if you don't hear, I don't care if you have a horrible social worker. You heard what was in this meeting. You hold the social worker accountable. You call them if they don't call you, and you do these services so that you can meet your own interests. Wow. And so really all about navigating the space between people's self-interest, reality, and how to kind of empower them. As long as their self-interest, it's not selfish, but it's moving towards a noble and a good end, you know. And God has really, I really believe God has graced me to have great outcomes, whether I'm doing that in the church, in the county, or through my consultancy.
That is great stuff. Great stuff. So I want to end with this. What's next for John Parker? You do a lot. You've done a lot, but I feel like you got so much further to go, so much left in the tank. What's next for you? What's your next chapter?
Couple of things. I mean, next chapter, there's a few, because I hang around, or I've been around people like Alex Price and Travail and Dobbins and other people of entrepreneurial spirits, really going to make sure that I'm working through my LLC to kind of, you know, when it was filed, it included a wide array of things that I can do, you know, and I just got to prepare. I mean, I'm 12 years out from retirement, so just working to create some passive income and through that, and so just working through a business plan with my wife. So that right off, but within, you guys are hearing it first, within 2 months, we will be releasing Greatest Thy Faithfulness, which is a song that's been in production that Pastor wrote. And we will have our first commercial release. We've got like some really good players on it. Demetrius Beasley, the guy who was the lead singer and writer for No Rush. I don't know if you're familiar with Red Hands, but he's on guitar there. We got not Franken, but we've got Funkyard. Some of the guys from Funkyard playing horns on it. They cut that, and Willie Mack is going to be on lead vocals with Pastor, and so we're very close.
Nice.
Yeah, we're very close to tying up the production, and so I'm really excited about that because that'll be our first commercial release. So I just wanted to drop that with you guys.
That's awesome. We got an exclusive today.
I'm going to say we love exclusives.
Yeah. So we'll do that. And then other than that, personal challenges, you know, I'm on a fitness journey too. So maybe, you know, when you guys call me again in the next year or so, you'll see a lot less of me in the screen. So because that all comes with accountability. I think that when you become a disciplined person, it should reach every area in your life. I don't want to be this big, greasy, stereotypical Black preacher with bad credit, bad health, bad name. You know what I'm saying? Poor with relationships. And so God has blessed me to clean up money, clean up credit, you know, make sure that I keep my name intact and all that type of stuff. And so health is that other frontier that I'm just working on. And I just want to make sure that I build enough equity in my name so that anything that I speak on, that people can kind of take it to the bank and say, yo, okay, that's dope, you know? So that's my challenge the ongoing challenge that I've taken seriously.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Okay. So first off, thank you for that exclusive. We love exclusives on this show.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that.
But so I'm gonna end with this because we love to end with a message. So what is John Parker? What is your message for the people? What you gonna leave us with, man?
Well, I'm here on this podcast because of relationships with you guys. I'll say this, that relationship is a more valuable currency with money than money. And so that affects every sphere, spiritually, naturally. But the order of the Bible is we know things through the natural, then the spiritual. So relationships, take them seriously, value them, invest in them, and identify positive and negative relationships. But it's positive relationships are a more valuable currency than money. And then also always try to build equity in your name, so that when your name comes across the phone, it doesn't say scam likely. Build equity in your name, have a good name.
That might have been one of the coldest quotes I have. Man,
let him finish, bro. Let him finish.
No, that was really it, man. I was petering out at that point. Yeah, that's it.
Man, mic drop.
I've never heard anyone use that. I don't even want to say nothing else. I'm gonna end with this. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us today, taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come sit down and chat with us, to educate us. We got into so much. We actually went routes that we didn't even. That's one thing I love about doing this. The route we thought we were going to go, we went completely different, but it was a success. So thank you, man.
Man, thank you guys for having me. It was truly an honor, and I trust that you guys will edit this and get it to something usable.
Absolutely. Well, there it is. John Parker, man, the myth, the legend. Alex Price.
Willie Ashford. The Willie Ashford.
It's the Black Culture Podcast. Peace.
Peace.